step out into their voice and into their power. I love it. It's awesome. So here we are together on Valentine's weekend, right? So I was thinking about this, and I did a little deep dive into Valentine history. I don't know if any of you have ever done that before. And so Valentine's Day is most often associated with Saint Valentine, who was a 3rd century priest who defied imperial decree to perform marriages in secret. Before that, ancient Romans celebrated a fertility festival in mid-February, and there were also festivals of renewal that were done during this time of year to acknowledge, I thought this was beautiful, the stirring of life in winter service. The Catholic Church declared February 14th as a day to honor St. Valentine in the late 5th century, and as we have learned throughout history, was probably an attempt to rebrand or repurpose this pagan festival into something that the church could condone, right? And so by the Middle Ages, the day had become a celebration of love, romance, and poetry. And it was in England where the practice of sending handmade notes to loved ones first became popular, centuries before commercial cards existed. In the 1840s, paper production and printing increased, and a female entrepreneur and artist named Esther Howland was the first to commercialize pre-made Valentine greeting cards, which I thought was interesting. One of the stories I read said she received a card from England that someone had given her, and her thought was, "That's pretty, but I could make a prettier one." So she did. And as people saw her cards, they started asking her to make them, and she thought, aha, I have a business here. And she started kind of a little cottage business where she had friends that would help, and she was the first that is documented to have done like the intricate layering of paper to make stand-up and pop-up cards. And so they became so popular that after her death in 1904, she was often referred to as the mother of the American Valentine, because her cards were being shipped all across the country. In 1861, Richard Cadbury introduced the first heart-shaped box of chocolates to get in on this holiday. And in 1911, the Hallmark Company was formed. After World War II, as disposable income increased and television advertising became common, jewelry and dining were added to the mix of Valentine's Day and have cemented it as a major high-spending retail holiday.
I bet.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We have all kinds of rituals that remind us to show love to those around us. The key is remembering that showing love does not require spending money, and every day is a day to live with love. So while we may have done a little extra in this weekend of Valentine's Day, or this week leading up to Valentine's Day, today we're going to be talking about how do we continue that out throughout every day of the year. So if we go back to that legend of St. Valentine and his decision to marry young couples in defiance of a decree from the emperor, who had made that decree because he believed that unmarried men would be more willing to go to war and lay down their lives for him, we see a story that symbolizes love that transcends fear, love that stands firm in truth, and love that unites. Metaphysically, this season represents the awakening of the heart center, and it's a continuation of the journey we began in Advent. It invites us to keep asking the question, what is trying to come alive in Unity's understanding, we honor the 12 powers. These are not external gifts, but internal spiritual capacities, one of which is love. Love corresponds to our heart center. It's the faculty that sees the divine in all and brings harmony to every situation. Our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, demonstrated this power during her healing journey. When told that she had an incurable illness, she did not fight with her body. She loved it instead. She spoke words of blessing to her organs and cells, and she affirmed the very life within every cell of her body. By doing this, she was choosing love over fear and divine principle over external circumstance. This is not sentimental affection. This is spiritual power. Love dissolves resistance, fear, judgment, and separation. Love harmonizes the body. Love restores peace to the nervous system. And love reorders our thinking. As Eric Butterworth reminded us, you are not here to get love. You are here to release love. And what we release transforms us. Love and unity is creative and healing. Love changes perception before it changes conditions. Myrtle Fillmore also said, there is no problem so big that it cannot be solved by love. So let's play with this idea of perception or perspective. We've probably all found ourselves looking at the same thing or the same situation as someone else in a far different way or having a far different viewpoint. So I'm going to show some pictures and shout out the first thing you see.
Duck. Rabbit.
So we're all looking at the same picture, right?
A rabbit duck.
Okay, so let's do a show of hands. How many saw the duck first? Okay, how many saw the rabbit first? How many still don't see both? Okay, so it's a shift in perspective from right to left. So we've got a duck's bill if you focus on the left, and those are ears, and this is a face if you focus on the right. You see bunny facing the other direction. So here's another one.
Horse.
Frog. Right, so oh yeah, there it is. So if you look at it one way, you've got a horse, right? It's kind of a tilted horse. Or can you see the frog sitting on the water? Does anybody see anything else? Just curious if there's something else hiding there. Okay, so what about this one? Queen. The princess, a young queen or princess, right? But what happens when we flip that 180 degrees and look at it from a different perspective? The same drawing, right? But depending on which side you're standing on, you're going to see two far different pictures. We've all probably heard the story of the blind men asked to touch an elephant and describe it. And they each describe something different based on where they're standing and what part of the elephant they're touching. So you see here one saying, oh, it's a spear as they're touching the tusk, and one's touching the tail and it's a rope. So they're each describing something different based on where they're standing. It's also true that their answers are based on their past experiences, right? They convince themselves that they're encountering something that they're familiar with instead of looking for information that this could be a whole new thing. So for the person saying it's a spear, it's a snake, it's a tree, they know what those things are, right? And so they're trying to make this new item fit with old thinking. At other times, we're living in an experience and we convince ourselves that we simply need this one thing to change and our circumstances will be infinitely better. We get tunnel vision, not realizing that it may not be the end-all solution we're seeking, or that we're trying to get away from the very thing that someone else is running towards. You can't see in the back. There's a guy sitting on a very tiny piece of land, looking out and seeing a person in the boat and saying, "Ah, boat! It's fucking here!" And the person in the boat is looking towards a tiny piece of land and saying, "Land!" So, getting that boat to land, I mean, they're going to be better off because there's two of them, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. Only one car. Very tiny piece of land. But in their mind, each of them, it seems, everything would be fine. If I could just get a vote, everything would be fine. Here we are. So I offer this to kind of prime the pump for thinking about a shift from human seeing to divine seeing. How often are we saying, how are they seeing it that way? When love would have us saying, how are they seeing it? When we read in 1 Samuel 16:7, man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. We can interpret this metaphysically to human consciousness sees behavior, divine consciousness perceives essence. When we operate from our human perspective or consciousness from a place of fear, we see threats, flaws, and differences. When we activate love, we begin to perceive the Christ nature in others, even when their behavior isn't aligned with their divinity. Unity minister Eric Butterworth often emphasized in his writings that Christ is not a person, but a level of awareness. The awakened consciousness that sees truth beyond all appearances. The power of love awakens that level of awareness. It doesn't deny what is happening, it simply sees through it. When we hear 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, God is love, we don't interpret this as a description of some outside deity. We understand this metaphysically as being love is the very essence of divine being. To say that God is love is to say love is the fundamental energy of the universe. And since God is within, love is the core of our being. When Jesus says to Matthew, in Matthew 22, verse 37 through 39, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, we hear the deeper message. To love God is to align with the divine principle within. To love our neighbor is to recognize the same principle expressing as others. And to love ourselves is to honor the divine presence expressing as us. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when Paul says, love never fails, Unity interprets this metaphysically. Love never fails because love is truth in action. When we operate from fear, we're going to fracture and separate. When we operate from love, we are in alignment with ourselves and each other. Alignment is healing. So if you look at some modern research from the Heart Math Institute, which is very interesting, I would encourage anyone to do a scroll trail into that stuff. They show something that mystics have known for a long time, right? That the heart has intelligence. And when we generate appreciation, compassion, or care, the heart rhythm becomes coherent or harmonious. And that coherence signals the brain, calms the nervous system, and shifts the entire body into balance. And if you go to their website, look at some of the heart math stuff, they have where people have put little electrodes on, and they do these practices, and you can watch the rhythm of their heart change, and at the same time, their brain waves respond to this complete coherence. Unity would say, when we activate the love faculty, we are restoring divine order. So today, we're going to do two shorter little meditations within the talk. So this first one, I'm going to invite us to go into a moment of meditation and anchor in to that power of love. So get comfortable in your seat. Feel your chair beneath you. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. We're going to anchor into this healing power. You may want to place a hand over your heart. Breathe gently and slowly, imagining that breath is flowing in and out through this heart center. Just allow your breathing to become steady and easy through that heart space. Love is a divine power. Really allow that to sink in. Love is not something to earn. It's not something to chase. That is the already planted right there in your soul. Now bring to mind a feeling of appreciation. Perhaps it's appreciation for the very breath that you're breathing, for this spiritual community, for simply existing in this time and place. Allow that appreciation to grow. Feel your heart softening, stabilizing, and harmonizing. Silently affirm, I live from the heart of divine love. Love restores me. Love heals me. Love is my true nature. And rest for a moment in that awareness. Love is my true nature. As you begin to come back to this awareness, allow your awareness to feel the love radiating from you. Allow that awareness to notice that love extending outward and empowering the same and those in this room. The heart now says we did it right then. Just bring our heart into coherence. As we all lift those electrodes and use it, seeing our heart rate even out. Instead of this painful pattern. We would have seen our brain energy shift into something that was in coherence with that heart. The HeartMath Institute has also confirmed with science that the electromagnetic field of the heart extends outside of our physical body. Our hearts are literally broadcasting our state of consciousness. This means that love is not private. Love is participatory. It's influential. It's creative power. It doesn't stop at your skin. When the love faculty is active, it naturally radiates outward. Jesus' command to love your enemies is metaphysically understood as withdrawing belief in separation and recognizing divine identity everywhere. Now, this doesn't mean that we approve of harmful behavior. It means refusing to deny that there is divine essence in anyone. Divine love is wise and empowering, not self-erasing. So we can express as divine love and have boundaries in place. Unity doesn't teach martyrdom, right? Love is not martyrdom. It teaches conscious expression. So sometimes we confuse love with tolerating harm. We confuse compassion with our silence. We confuse spirituality with self-erasure. But when we affirm our sacred worth and the sacred worth of every being, we are affirming God's presence within them. And love, divine love, does not enable abuse, it doesn't participate in injustice, and it doesn't look away when dignity is denied. Even in Scripture, love has strength. In the Gospel accounts, we see Jesus Christ embody radical compassion and also fierce clarity. He healed, he forgave, he welcomed the marginalized, and he also overturned some tables. And he spoke truth in the face of power. And he set boundaries around those and the things that desecrated the sacred. Love without boundaries becomes martyrdom. And Boundaries without love become hostility. But divine love expresses this firm, clear, and grounded presence. When we say, I will not participate in harm, I will not deny another humanity, I will not abandon my own sacred work, that is love speaking. Unity teaches that we aren't separate beings competing for dignity, right? It's not the Hunger Games for dignity and love and respect and self-worth. We are individualized expressions of this one life. And when we anchor into that love that is our very nature, we become steady, we become clear, and we become powerful in the most peaceful ways. At its core, Unity teaches that there is only one presence and one power. We say it every Sunday, and maybe more often if you're prone to saying that statement throughout your week. When we're perceiving through fear or resentment and anger, we experience fragmentation and separation. When we perceive through love, we experience connection. That shift is often subtle but powerful. So instead of a me versus you, love sees life is expressing in different and interesting ways. Instead of this should be happening, love asks, how is spirit moving here? Or where is spirit still present here? Instead of I am not enough, love recognizes I am an expression of divine. Going back to that research from the Heart Math Institute, it shows us when we reach the state of heart coherence, our cognitive function, emotional regulation, and intuitive clarity improve drastically. So when our heart is in harmony, in other words, when we're centered in that connection with our divine essence, our human brain can think more clearly. We all would like to think more clearly, yes? No, I would. The mind is aligned with divine mind. And perception changes. Of course it does. How could it not? So situations that felt threatening suddenly feel workable. People who felt adversarial become human. And obstacles begin to look like opportunities for growth. Love literally reorganizes our nervous system. And through that, it reorganizes our experience with this world. We know, as Unity students, that science confirms that when we intentionally align with oneness consciousness, we radiate that love far outside of our physical body. So now we're going to go back in to a state of meditation. I'm going to invite you to re-enter that state of meditation. And we're going to create a field of love, the power that heals, that reaches beyond these walls. So again, become comfortable in your seat. Take in a deep breath. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. Return your awareness to that heart space. Placing your hand there, that helps you to breathe in and out through that space. Take a few deep breaths through that heart space. And imagine a radiant light glowing there. It may even feel like warmth in your chest, or warmth in your hands. This is divine love. Intelligent, calm, steady. With each breath, allow that light to expand until it fills every cell of your physical body. Feel it spreading throughout your chest, your arms, your legs, your toes. You are breathing that light inside your physical body. Now allow it to expand outside of your body. Blessing this room, filling this sanctuary with love and light. Now let it go outside of this room into the entire building. Fill this entire church building with love and light so strong and bright driving by the old monster, can't help but feel it and wonder why they suddenly have such feelings of love and peace enter into their being. Silently affirm, divine love flows through me and out into the world. Bring to mind someone that you love easily and surround them with this light. See them encased in your love. Now bring to mind someone is in your daily life and surround them with the same light. And now someone who's a bit more of a challenge for you. Make the choice to surround them in the same light. See all of these individuals embraced in the same divine presence, the divine essence that is the truth of who you are and the truth of who they are. And now go even bigger. Expand that love outward. Surround that city with a bubble of divine virtue, love, and light. Again, we're going to expand it out to cover our entire nation. I know how powerful you guys are. One more time, we're going to encircle this entire thing with the light and the power of divine essence, divine love, as we silently affirm love harmonizes humanity. Love restores peace. Love heals the world. We're going to rest for a moment in that awareness that love heals the world. All right, those who travel now circling the planet, come back to this room, to this space. Breathe in that love that heals the world. This is one of my favorite visualizations for our spiritual community. Is I love to visualize that when we are all here together in the presence of each other, in the presence of this divine love, that there is just a glow radiating from this little building here on East Seminole in Springfield, Missouri. And that people who are driving by or walking by can't help but look over and think, what is going on in there? Something wonderful. There's just a good feeling. We hear it from so many people who wander into our church space. Visitors, people who are accessing our pantry, our unsheltered friends who come to get some warmth for the night. So many people walk in these doors and they're in awe, and they'll just blurt out, I don't know what it is about this place, but it feels really good. That's us, right? That's us living as this divine energy. And in this way, thinking about Valentine's Day and the commercialization of it, we can release that. And Valentine's Day can become a sacred ritual if we allow it to remind us of who we are. Not seekers of love, but expressions of love. The love faculty within you isn't fragile. It's not dependent on circumstance. It is a divine endowment. Myrtle Fillmore also said we must love ourselves into wholeness and love others into freedom. When we choose patience, love is there. When we bless instead of condemn, that's love. And where love is active, healing follows. The outer world may remain the same initially, but through the lens of love, when we flip our perspective, we start to see things differently. We start to experience things differently. And when perception changes, our responses can change. And when our responses change, the outcomes begin to change. And that is why love is not sentimental in unity practice. Love is power. One of the most powerful things we can experience and release and be in the world. So this week, when we breathe, let's breathe through our hearts. And when we speak, let's speak from that place of heart coherence. And when we encounter challenges, let's return to that coherence and ask, how would love respond? Where is spirit in this place? Because by aligning with our divine essence, we're not merely living a life. We are living